Hare Krishna, welcome everybody. Now, first thing I wanted to say is, have you ever tried speaking to a camera? I mean, if you have a chance, set up your video camera and just look at it and speak to it and see what that looks like and how that feels. And that's a little awkward. So what I think would be really cool is if all of you who watch this show can send me a picture, can email me a picture, and then I'll make a collage, and then behind the camera I can put all your pictures, and then I can actually see you. Think that's a good idea? I do. So, you all know my email, Mahatma, simple one, mahatmadasa@gmail, mahatmadasa with an A at the end at gmail. Just send me your picture. Or send me at Mahatma Das. I think that's my Facebook. I don't even know what it is, but probably Mahatma Das. Send me some pictures and I'll print them out and put them together. Then would it really be cool also is I could show everybody who's watching, all of you, and then all of you could see one another. You could see what you look like. And I go, here's Bhaktin Carol, and here's Manjesh, and here's Patrick, and here's whoever's with us, Mayapur Leela, like that. So you think that's a good idea? Should we do that? I think so. Because, really, I'm just talking to a camera. That's all I'm doing. And some people, when they sit in front of a camera and they start to talk, they get tongue-tied. They need people. So it's really nice if we have people. I guess, radio show hosts are used to talking into microphones. And I guess people on TV, like newscasters, they're used to talking into television cameras and seeing millions of people out there. But anyway, so I just thought, well, that would be a good idea. So, who's with us today? I never would have guessed. Manjesh. Akhilananda. Is Chaturatma here? No. Is this actually true? Last night. Oh, that's last night. So where's tonight stand for? Where do we start tonight? Nobody knows. Manjesh and Mahatma. Maybe Karuna Shakti. So, we have been speaking about a very interesting topic. And in speaking about this topic, we begin to see that men and women have different roles, they have different natures. If we didn't already see that, if we were somehow oblivious to that, we're seeing it more clearly. All of you are probably familiar with this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. So, my sister read that book, and after she read the book, she said, everybody knows this. This guy sold millions of books writing about something everybody knows. And I said, well, I guess everybody doesn't know, because if they did, then he wouldn't have been able to sell all the books. It would have been old information that everybody already knows. So what this shows is that everybody doesn't always have common sense. What may be common to my sister is not common to everyone. And the meaning of common sense is that everybody knows it. So therefore it's called common. Oh, everybody knows that. Everybody understands that. Therefore it's common sense. But the fact is, what is common sense is not always common. Now, I think many men and women can testify that after getting married, they didn't know a lot about their spouses. Or they thought they did, but because men and women are wired differently, when you finally move in and see how they're wired, you begin to observe, and sometimes observe in amazement, how the opposite sex operates, because in many ways they operate much differently. And sometimes I liken it to a machine. Now let's say you're a very young boy or girl, and you're given a complex machine, let's say a super computer, and you don't really know a lot about computers, with all this elaborate, extravagant, detailed, complex software that could put a man on the moon. And so you don't really know how to work it, and you're looking at it, and you're looking at the software, and it's confusing. And I think sometimes for us, when we become intimate with the opposite sex, it's a bit like this complicated machine or this complicated computer, and we don't say, well, if I touch this, you touch this button, and then something goes haywire. So sometimes A man will say something to a woman, very innocently say something, and she gets very upset. Or a woman will innocently say something to her husband, and he gets upset. So many, many people have pointed out that our educational system fails in many ways because we don't teach children very practical things, many of the practical things that they need to know to exist, to function, to be successful in this world, both materially and spiritually. Obviously spiritually, Prabhupada said modern education is like a slaughterhouse, but even just to function materially, much of what we need we don't always get from our parents. Many people point out that the average person is financially illiterate. Doesn't matter how much money they have, they'll always be in debt. The more money they get, the more they buy, the more they're in debt. They didn't have any financial education in school. Now look at the number of divorces, the divorce rate. That indicates people don't know how to properly deal with the opposite sex. It's not easy. Now, in Krishna consciousness, we read, this is the behavior of the man, this is the behavior of the woman. It seems simple until you put them together, and it's no longer simple. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we men who lived as brahmacharis in the ashram never got any training in the grihastha ashram because, after all, why should we? We were brahmacharis. We were only being trained to understand what brahmachari life is and act as best we could as the ideal brahmachari. The problem was when we left the brahmachari ashram, we didn't know what to do, or many of us didn't know what to do, unless we were very intuitive, common sense people, had information or had insight. And many of us didn't. We really didn't have much of a clue. And so we enter the grihastha ashram without any particular training, and we don't know whether to turn left or right, or we don't understand why what we said has upset our wife. We're getting dazed and mazed and crazed by the whole thing. And then on top of that, we took vows of celibacy, and then we're trying to figure out what that's all about, how to do that, or if we can do it, and what happens when we can't do it. And so it's not easy. So the more we understand how to deal with the opposite sex, the more we understand the ramifications of improper dealings, the better off we'll be in the grihastha ashram. Now, what's the importance of the grihastha ashram? Well, I think one significant importance is this, and it is kind of funny to say this because it almost doesn't sound Krishna conscious. I'll say it anyway because it is true, at least on some level. And it is this. In Krishna consciousness, we say you cannot be happy if you're not Krishna conscious. It's only pure bhakti. Ahaituki apratihata yatma suprasidati. Bhagavatam says, unless devotional service is unmotivated and uninterrupted, you won't be happy. You won't be satisfied. It's the only thing that can satisfy you. And we all experience that, and no one will deny that. Yet, at the same time, you see practically that most of the happiness a person gets in life, at least on some level, comes, or most of the distress comes from his partner. Uddhava, is that true or false? Whoops. In other words, if things are bad at the home front, are you going to be like, is your life going to be upset even if things are bad at the home front, but you're chanting really good rounds, but you still have to go back to the home front. So it's at least we can say it's extremely unsettling. And certainly we can say that if you're not a devotee, then most of your happiness or most of your distress generally comes from what's going on at home. And if you're not really happy in your relationship with your spouse, it's pretty hard to be happy in other aspects of your life. Of course, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. If you're transcendental, if you're a good devotee, you may transcend that. But still, that disturbance at home is going to disturb you, and in some way it's going to negatively affect your Krishna consciousness to some degree. Unless you are entirely transcendental, or unless you take it as Krishna's arrangement and totally accept it, that this is it's all mercy because I'm not going to be happy materially, and Krishna doesn't want me to, and it's just making me detached. But generally, we don't think that way, at least not when we're younger and we want to be happy in family life. So anyway, if you think about it, maybe Uddhava has only experienced happiness and no distress. But if you experience distress, then you'll see how much that can disturb your Krishna consciousness. So, point is, it's important for us who are in the grihastha ashram, and even for those who are not, to understand what makes men tick and what makes women tick. Now, last week we were talking about this, and we made the statement that men, what they desire is respect, and what women desire is affection. Women really don't care a whole lot about respect. Their egos are not as big as ours. Men tend to care more about respect. In fact, I've been in some temples where if certain men weren't respected, they basically became depressed. And everybody knew that, so everybody went out of their way to show them respect. Otherwise, they kind of became like crazy men, and you couldn't get along with them. They wouldn't do anything, and they'd yell and scream at you all the time. So we'd all huddle together and say, we got to give respect to so-and-so, Prabhu, and he'll be happy. And then we'd give him respect, and he'd be smiling and happy. But that's actually what men are like, particularly with their wives, if their wives respect them. Instead of saying, you should do this, you should do that, why did you do this, why did you do that, you're so dumb, you're so sloppy, this and that, and say, would it be okay if you could do this? Well, that shows respect. Right? Do you think it's possible you could do this? Or don't you think it would be nicer? Or what do you think about this idea? Think it would be better? Men respond better to that. And men tend to want to lecture to their wives when their wives do something wrong. Often when all their wives want is what, Uddhava? Do they want to be lectured to, or what do they want? Let's see if Uddhava knows. He's only been married about a year. No. When like you see like your wife is upset about something, and sure she has a problem, and then you think as a man, well, I'll fix the problem. So you start lecturing to her about the problem. What does she really want? Maybe Uddhava doesn't know yet. What? She wants to be listened to. Yeah. She wants sympathy. She doesn't want to be said, well, I can fix that. What you really need to do is, and she's crying and upset, what you really need to do is get your act together. Don't be so emotional. And, just use your intelligence. And, that's not what she wants to hear. But that's how a man tends to deal with his problems, right? We were discussing that men either deal entirely emotionally or entirely from the level of intelligence. So when they have a problem, often they'll just be very analytical. Okay, this is what you should do. Don't get upset. Don't get sidetracked. Just stay on course and understand it's going to get better and this and that. So men and women operate differently. So it's important in a relationship like that, if you're going to be living with one, and if you're going to be dealing with one that you don't live with, that you understand what makes them work. So part of what we're doing in this course is understanding it, but at the same time looking at these Vedic paradigms and understanding the principles and how we can apply them, and where at what point the practices which were followed in ancient times may not be entirely applicable to us today. So what we've been discussing the last 2 weeks is the conception of women needing protection, because not everybody understands exactly what that means. Not everybody understands clearly what Prabhupada meant by that. And it almost sounds like a woman is like a little kid, and the man should hold her by the hand, take care of her so she won't get in trouble. If you read some things in the Bhagavatam, it can sound that way. It could sound like that. And so we've been talking about that, but also we've been talking about how the woman protects the man. Because the man has a nature in which, Prabhupada said, a man is not happy with one woman. He has a nature where he would like to enjoy many women, which is, of course, not good for marriage. So the wife protects the husband, satisfies the husband, protects him in the sense of protecting him from attraction or allurement to other women by creating a beautiful family and household in which he is satisfied. It's important for the woman to understand that. The man satisfies the woman by being chaste to her by not being attracted to other men, by taking care of her, by providing necessities for her, home, clothes, jewelry, children, food, and such things. These are things women want, and she's satisfied when her husband does that, and naturally when she's satisfied with him, as long as he doesn't try to give her a lecture when she's in an emotionally upset state, if she's happy with him, then she remains devoted to him. That's the idea. Now, then you have this idea in the Vedic, the Vedic concept of the wife. You have this idea of the, what's the word? It starts with an S. Does anybody know? There's a word for a wife. What's it called? It starts with an S. U. B. Hint, hint. What is it? The S-U-B, what wife? Submarine wife? No. The subtractive wife? No. The substitute wife? Subordinate? Close. Aditya, you're getting close. Submissive. Yes. Every man wants a wife who does whatever he says. And she says, yes, Prabhu, whatever you say, I will do. Imagine if a man had a wife like that. If there were wives like that available, a man would want like 100 of them. So we have this concept. And then the man gets married and he's thinking, okay, according to the Vedic paradigm, my wife is supposed to be submissive. That means do whatever I say. Honey, shine my toenails. Honey, polish my shoes. Honey, cut the hair in my ears. And so we get this concept, and his wife is just running around, and the husband's just couch potatoing it, and she's just doing whatever he says. And you think that's funny, and back in the day, in the early days of our movement, when men got married, that's what they were expecting. But rather than getting that, oftentimes they got pies thrown in their face by their wives. And that really upset them, and that really caught them off guard. And they thought they had a right to discipline their wives, even with physical force. It was just a mess. So, how is a man supposed to understand submissive wife, and how is a woman supposed to understand submissive wife? And how is a man, and what is the archetype of a man? What is he supposed to be? He's supposed to be the guru figure, the self-disciplined man, the man with spiritual knowledge, the man who is totally controlled, the man who's dutiful. Despite all difficulties, he supplies for the family. So you have these ideals. Here's this ideal guru type, responsible male, father figure who can guide the whole family back to Godhead, who's totally disciplined, trained as a brahmachari. He's got everything under control, provides for his family, doesn't waver in his duty, and this submissive wife. So if you have those two, you can say, hey, what could go wrong there? Problem is, we don't have those two. We have some of that, and the wife says to the husband, you should be, the husband says to the wife, you should be submissive. And the wife says, well, you're not perfect, so why should I be submissive to you? So there's truth to that, right? Because here the husband's asking the wife, just be submissive, do whatever I say. And she's saying, well, who are you? You're not some ideal guru figure that's perfect, that doesn't make mistakes. So often the husbands, particularly immature ones, when they see their wife is not as submissive as they hoped she was when they were honeymooning, or they thought she was when they're honeymooning, he never looks at himself and says, well, how ideal am I? How great a man am I that this woman deserves to be so submissive to me? And normally, in healthy marriages, the woman understands the psychology of the man, that he likes to be in charge. But at the same time, the man understands the psychology of the woman, that she didn't grow up in a culture where women didn't have control. So there's some balance, and there's some willingness for the man to admit, well, my wife is better in certain areas, so let her control and take charge. And the woman acknowledges that my husband is better in other areas where I should naturally submit to. And it varies from couple to couple because we're all different. And if we try to stereotype it, it can create tremendous problems. So ultimately, I think as in anything, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be happy, so wanted us to be stable, so as a platform to develop our Krishna consciousness. So what's the point of following everything by the book and being totally miserable? I'm the staunch husband, this is my submissive wife, and we're totally miserable, and we hate one another, we can't stand it, and we're Krishna conscious. What's the point? The point is to advance in devotional service according to what is favorable, and that's the principle. Do what's favorable. Now someone could say, well, the standards are there, this is what's favorable, but sometimes it's not always favorable according to the circumstance, the time, the individual. Yes, we have ideals. I think the biggest ideal, if we want to create a standard, the biggest ideal that Prabhupada had was that we would stay together. But at the same time, what if a husband is abusing his wife? Do you think Prabhupada would want this woman to stay with this man who could endanger her physically or emotionally? No, he wouldn't. So these are all things to consider. So now, that was a big introduction. Let's see what you're talking about out there on chat. If you're watching this, you're not on chat, click below my picture, you can get onto chat. What does it say? Chatsy below it? Say chat or chat? Live chat room. Click on the live chat room, and then you can see what's going on here with the commentaries by the devotees in the live chat room. So Bhakti Carol, Aditya says, men like, he said, Aditya says, when men do that, we're talking about, men lecturing to the woman when she's upset. When men do that, isn't that showing a non-humble quality, like as you were saying about lecturing to others? Yeah, so okay. But a lot of times men think, well, they're in control of the home, so they have the right to lecture. And that makes perfect sense to a man. Well, I'm the smart one, I'm the one who's not emotional here, I'm in charge of this place, my wife's having trouble, let me come to the rescue. It's part of the male psychology to fix things. Part of I will protect you. But that psychology can be definitely an action which is not considered exactly humble, what to speak of not very sensitive. But it's how men are often wired. They're wired to fix things. I'll fix you. You've got a problem, I'll fix it. Just stop crying, you don't need to cry, here's the answer, here's the solution. Right? And if another woman's there, what you'll observe is that women won't do that generally, if ever. They'll just go, oh, you must be so upset. Oh, I feel so bad for you. The men are like, listen to me, I'll solve this for you. Right? Right, Uddhava? Is that how they do it? Uddhava agrees. But Uddhava knows that, so he doesn't do that, right? At least he knows not to do it. He's been trained. Non-humble. I don't think often men think about humility in relation to their wives because they think their wives are supposed to be, what's the S word? Submissive. So why should I have to be humble to someone who is supposed to be submissive? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to offer obeisances to his disciples and say, I'm your servant. So you could say, as the guru, why should he be humble toward his disciple? He doesn't have to be. But that's actually how an advanced devotee sees. He doesn't see, oh, this is my disciple. He would say, this is the person Krishna sent me to serve. So actually, guys, when you get married, you don't become the boss, you become the servant of your wife and children. Of course, if you've been married a while, you already know that, but when you're newlywed, you may think it's not going to be that way. The longer you stay married, the more you realize that this is really a service-oriented ashram. Sometimes more service than you want to do in a day. So that's a lot where this comes from, conception of what a husband is or should be, or say the wrong conception, or a somewhat contaminated conception, perhaps, or narrow conception, mixed with this male psychology of wanting to fix things and be the boss and the controller and the so-called protector. That's not exactly how women always want to be protected. If they do, they'll usually ask you, can you figure this out for me? So, So Aditya says, yeah, like Prabhupada just said, men like to lecture to the women. Isn't that illustrating a non-humble quality? Yes, so we're discussing that. Bhakti Carol said, you've mentioned so far, I think men commit most all rapes. Yeah, I read that. They commit 100%. Have big egos, demand respect, are dishonest to get sex. This is all stuff we've talked about in the last month or so. Are almost always thinking of sex. Every 16 seconds, they have a sexual thought. Look up pornography, are excited by slightest visuals, but aren't men supposed to be better than women? Bhakti and Carol, you should be a comedian. Bhakti and Carol's really good at getting back at the men, right? So it's funny. I mean, that's why I was making those points in the first place, because we have this ideal. Okay, the men are these perfect guys, and the women, you know, they're twice as hungry, they're 4 times this, 7 times as lusty. You know, the women are looked at as, in some cases, as not as elevated as men. And then here we're learning about most of the rapes, sexual violence is committed by men. Most of the crimes are committed by men, or what do we say, murders. Men do have big egos. They want respect. Sometimes they cheat on their wives. Of course, women cheat on their husbands. They're always thinking of sex, or if they're not thinking of sex, they're thinking about when they're going to think of sex. And 60% of men, at least 60 or 70, regularly view pornography. And they just see a little skin on a woman and they get all bewildered and sexually disturbed. And men are supposed to be better than women. What a good question. Who can answer that question? I think a lot lies in the potential. And because it's Kali Yuga, men are certainly being slapped down, and gradually all good qualities are eroding. And in Kali Yuga, it is said actually there aren't any good qualities. So it's very interesting when you talk about the good qualities of men or the so-called inferior qualities of women. Prabhupada also talks about women tending to attend religious functions in larger numbers than men, or tending to have a more natural faith in God than men have. So, but I think it's better that we look at any individual's good qualities, as Prabhupada did, and begin to fan the flame of those good qualities. And also understand, as Prabhupada said again and again, that bodies may be different and have different natures, different psychology, mental natures, physical natures. But spiritually, the process of Krishna consciousness works equally for men or women, and either one can take advantage, and often cases women may take more advantage of it than their husbands. So there's no guarantee that the husbands are more Krishna conscious. And many men will tell you their wives are more Krishna conscious than they are. And what I think we can also gather from this is that men have great challenges in advancing in spiritual life. They have advantages and they have great challenges, just as women have advantages and challenges. So the strong sexual desire that men have and the strong physical attraction they have for women is a great challenge in advancing in spiritual life. So one of the things that you find in Kali Yuga, particularly as it progresses, it becomes more and more difficult to categorize things exactly as one way or the other. So there's this huge gray area that develops. And oftentimes, if we say, well, it's this way or it's this way, we can lose touch with reality and begin to alienate people in how we present Krishna consciousness, because we may be speaking about things that are not really existing in people's normal day-to-day experience. Now, one of the things that Prabhupada would like us to do is model a more ideal standard. So in our own lives, if we can model what we believe is a more ideal standard, or a more Vedic standard, a more Krishna conscious standard, and show that to people, then they can see something real. But if we can't even do that, then who are we, in a sense, to criticize anyone else? So that's an important principle. And as we know, example speaks much louder than words. So one of the best ways to help the world become Krishna conscious is just be Krishna conscious and set an example. And our society, both the Krishna conscious society and the society we live in, is in dire need of examples of couples that stay together, who learn to live cooperatively, peacefully, and advance spiritually. So as I was saying before, if we're looking at here the example of here's the ideal husband and here's the example of here's the ideal wife, if we're looking what that really means, I think more importantly we may want to look at what Prabhupada really wanted from marriage was that the couple remain together and help one another advance in Krishna consciousness. And if they do that, that's a successful marriage, no matter how they do it. Maybe the woman's going to end up wearing the pants if that's what makes everybody happy. The point is, if they both become Krishna conscious, if they stay together, if they raise their children in Krishna consciousness, that's success. That's really the bottom line of success. I think the other things, it's better to see them a little more on the side of details and see the success, the foundational success of the marriage as helping one another progress in Krishna consciousness. That's really what we want to do. Okay. Thank you, Bhakti and Carol. And I think that was a rhetorical question. I don't think. I know it was. Who's better than who these days? Aditya says, no, men aren't better than women. That's one. No, that's two no's. If you say three, you should say it 3 times, Aditya, because 3 times means you mean it. No. She almost said it 3 times because she used 3 O's after the second no. No. Subservient, subordinate, submissive. That's what we want from you ladies out there. So now, does this mean, am I saying, okay, ladies, you don't have to be submissive to your husband. After you hear this show, you're going to go walk back into your husband and you're going to throw a pie in his face and say, I'm not taking nothing from you anymore. Is that? And if you have any problem with that, go talk to Mahatma. So now I'm going to be getting hate emails for the rest of my life, and I'll be the source, the catalyst of so many divorces in ISKCON. So that we're not saying that. No, I think it's natural for women to be submissive. It's natural for them to take a subordinate position. But it's not natural for them to submit to a man who is not qualified to be submitted to. It's not natural to be submissive to a man who's going to take advantage of them. And I think most women will tell you, if the man is submissible, is that a word? Submissible? That's a good word to use. If the man is qualified to be submitted to, which is my word which is what submissible means to me, which is not a word. So I don't think women have a problem with that, because surrender is natural where there is affection, where there is protection. And women naturally will want to be subordinate and so forth. It's just when you look at things, as Carol explained, that here are these men who are not always full of the greatest qualities, and we're being asked to be subordinate, submissive. Sometimes that becomes a problem. Now, one could argue, but that could help purify the man if I do that, and I would say that may be true, if you can do that. By being the gentle, humble, submissive wife, the man may also become purified by that. That's possible. But that's also a question of safety. Maybe he'll ruin your life in the process. Maybe it's not possible for you to remain in that state in the presence of someone who cannot properly take care of you. So, in Shastra it says the highest duty of the woman is chastity to her husband. But guys, you have to facilitate that chastity. You have to be good husbands, so the wife naturally will be devoted to you. And so we can't ask someone. It's just like asking a disciple to be 100% devoted to a guru who falls away from Krishna consciousness. That's just It's not proper to ask that. And if a guru falls away, the disciple takes shelter of a Siksha guru to get guidance, because that guru can no longer give guidance. So how can a wife take guidance? You hear that rain out there in the background? How can a wife take guidance from a man who's not qualified to give it? It's difficult. Okay, what else are you talking about? Bhakti and Carol has cleared up Aditya's question. Okay, now Aditya said, no, no, no. And that was the answer to the question, but aren't men supposed to be better than women? And Aditya is saying, no, no, no. Now let me take a wild guess here. Aditya must be a woman. How did I know that? I must be mystical, intuitive. Okay. Bhakti and Carol says, my fiancé is a devotee, and he is genuinely better. He is guru. He has years of knowledge. He teaches me. He leads me. So that's wonderful. Ladies, if you're not married, then you should write down all the qualities of the man that you want on a piece of paper. And then when you meet the man who doesn't fulfill, or doesn't have those qualities, then you know, this is not the man that I wrote about on my paper. And when you meet the man who does, you say, this is the man. That's the kind of man that you would naturally want to submit to. I think often we can see what the points that Prabhupada makes is that it's natural for a woman to be submissive, to be subordinate, and so forth. But it's not natural, or it can't be natural, or it's difficult to be natural if the husband is not qualified. And Prabhupada said, so when Prabhupada's saying, naturally the women are happy to be protected, or naturally they need to be protected. So we can assume that Prabhupada is referring to a man who can actually give protection. He's not saying, well, you should just submit to any man who can't offer you real protection. And then we have the verse in Bhagavatam, you shouldn't be a husband. Na sasyat, na guru sasyat. You shouldn't be guru. No, if you're going to be a husband or a father, you have to be a guru. You have to be qualified. So that's when things get messed up. Or men, you should also know, if you're not married, what kind of woman you would like to be married to. And you should also know what kind of husband you think that woman would like, and be that husband. Okay. Vaishnava Murari Das. How to get above things like almost always thinking of sex, looking up pornography, excited by the slight visuals. Okay, now this gives a chance. Aditya says, I'm a guy. Oh my God. That is amazing. I never would have guessed. I guess I'm not mystical. I'm not intuitive. Just see. I've been exposed. Aditya is defending women. Women, send him a kiss. Send him an email kiss and a hug. He's defending you. You need more men out there defending you. So, that is wonderful, Aditya. So, Vaishnava Murari is asking a question that will only take about 12 hours to answer. And that is, or maybe 12 lifetimes, and that is how to get above things like almost always thinking of sex, or looking up pornography, excited by slight visuals. Well, there's one simple answer. Don't look at them. That kind of solves the problem, right? Doesn't it? Because men like to look at attractive women, because attractive women sexually stimulate them. So if you don't look at them, you've solved the whole problem. Now that sounds kind of simplistic, but the more you meditate on it, the more you'll see. It's extremely profound, because that's where the whole problem starts for men. And when a woman understands this, if she deeply understands this, it kind of makes her feel, for lack of a better word, yucky, to think guys are investigating her body just like dogs are smelling one another, which is basically what men do. Their intentions may be not as gross as dogs, but they're looking. They like to look, because that is how they become sexually stimulated. And it's a really nice practice for us as devotees, when we find ourselves deviating from Krishna consciousness, to stop and then to catch ourselves while we're doing it, and catch what we're doing, and just kind of like like you're taking a video and then you stop it and say, look at what I'm doing, and admit what you're doing and catch yourself and say, see, I'm just like an animal. I'm acting just like an animal here. Now it takes a little bravery. Not every man or every woman is willing to do that. Not every man can do it. But if you can catch yourself in mid-motion, look what I'm doing. I'm looking at this beautiful woman. I'm lusting after this woman. And just stop and start talking to yourself. Say, what are you doing? What are you doing that for? Why do you want to think of that? That's not going to help you. That's only taking you away from Krishna. Right? It's a powerful process. And then you start talking to yourself and say, look at what you're doing. Have a conversation. Your intelligence begins to talk and discuss. Now, the thing is, in our devotional lives, we don't want to get so far gone down the road that our intelligence is no longer functioning, so we can't even have this conversation. So therefore we have some kind of sattvic devotional life, so our intelligence is somewhat intact, so that when the mind takes over, which means now the mode of passion is taking over, the intelligence which is not in the mode of goodness but acts to put us in the mode of goodness, can reason with the mind and say, no, it's not what I want, it's not what I need, it's not the right thing, this is a problem, it's going to create more problems. So we reason, and then that use of intelligence brings us to goodness. But if we don't have enough goodness in our life, then passion takes over, and passion leads to ignorance. And then one thing leads to another, and pretty soon you're a mess. So there's a saying, nip it in the bud. And so controlling the eyes, controlling the mind by intelligence, doing what is right, avoiding what is wrong, is an act of nipping it in the bud. Because if we don't nip it in the bud, then dayato vishayam punsam sangosteshu bhajayate. What happens is that for meditation you become attached. When you become attached, what happens? Attachment means I want it. So now it is much, much, much more difficult when you want it. Just like you walk into a store, there's so many things in there. You're walking up this aisle, that aisle. All of a sudden you see one thing, you go, oh my God, the new whatever, the new iPad. Oh my, you start sweating, you start getting nervous, you start playing with it. Oh my God, this thing is so cool, I have to have one. Now you're in trouble. Right? Whereas if you walk through and you go, oh, that iPad, that thing is cool, I have no money, I'm out of here. You just don't look at it because you know you'll get into trouble. So that's what happens with our eyes. They get us into trouble. But your eyes they get you into trouble with women, they get you into trouble shopping also. Don't they? Okay. So, because men, as you said, are almost demoniac. Did I say that? Well, I said that Prabhupada said we're all by nature demoniac, and we're trying to become purified, men and women. But men do have this very strong sexual side to them, and sexuality, that gross sexuality, can be a very degrading influence in their lives. It can ruin their marriages. It can ruin other women's lives. If these things come naturally to many men, why are they wired that way? Very good question, Bhakti and Carol. Why are men wired so sexually? And I think many men ask themselves, why am I wired this way? And my mind is becoming so disturbed. Well, I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it. If you want to look at it from the most Krishna-conscious way, the most Krishna-conscious way of looking at it is that Prabhupada said, you can understand how you're advancing in Krishna consciousness by looking at the level of your sex desire. He said that in a lecture. I believe that lecture was on the teachings of Queen Kunti. And I believe that lecture was in 1972 in Los Angeles, and I believe I was there. But how do you expect me to remember things that happened almost 40 years ago. And I don't even remember what I did yesterday. But anyway, Prabhupada did say that. It's kind of like a built-in gauge that you can understand. So, when we're advancing in Krishna consciousness, that desire diminishes. And that's a sign that we're becoming detached and more connected to the beauty of Krishna. So that's a good thing, because then when we're feeling sexual urges, we can know, okay, let me trace back my steps. I must be doing something wrong. Perhaps I need to be rising earlier. Perhaps something's going on with my eating that's disturbing me. Perhaps my rounds are not good. Perhaps I'm not reading enough. Perhaps I offended the devotee. Perhaps my relationships with the devotees are not good. Perhaps I offended the deity. There's ways we can look at that, because it is a definite barometer. That's one way. Of course, another obvious answer is that there would be no propagation of the species if men weren't wired that way. But even more fundamental than that, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam that we come into the world to enjoy beautiful women. That's an amazing statement, isn't it? We come into the material world to enjoy beautiful women. That's why we came here. And if that's why you came here, that certainly you're going to get a body to enjoy it. Right? Because God fulfills everyone's desires. We've come into this world to enjoy sex. Here is the body. I've given you a body that can enjoy sex. So if you came into the material world and you got a body that couldn't enjoy sex, and you weren't a devotee, you would think, I got a rotten deal here. I got a bad vehicle. I have to have this vehicle repaired. I've got to get a prescription to some sexual stimulant. This is a rotten deal. I came into this world to enjoy. So really that strong sexual desire is a fulfillment of our original desire to come and enjoy in this world. And it is also the way in which, or by which, Maya keeps us here. Like Prabhupada once gave the example, when the hunter plays a flute, the deer will stop and listen. And then because the deer stops, he can shoot the flute. Or the fish will be captured by the tongue because there's food attached to a hook, and then the fish will eat it and get caught by the fisherman. And he gave different examples of how different animals are captured. A elephant is they have a male elephant, and they have a she elephant a little bit away from him, and they have a covered pit in between the male elephant and the she elephant, but he can't see the pit, so he runs after the she elephant, and then he falls in the pit, and they capture him. So we are similarly captured by the female form or by the opposite sex in some way. So, ultimately, if you want to look at it from a Krishna conscious point of view, say it's there to keep us in the material world, because everywhere in Shastra we learn that this is the central attraction and the central binding force, and what keeps us attached to the world and the bodily concept. So you can say Krishna created many functions by creating sex desire. And it's also there to force us to become more self-disciplined and controlled so that we can be devoted to one person. And of course, we know if it wasn't enjoyable, no one would do it, and there'd be no propagation of the species. So there are many reasons. So Aditya says, how can we ignore something that is everywhere? Are you referring to attractive women? Well, we can't ignore, but we can ignore meditating upon. As Prabhupada said, they're everywhere. As you know, they're everywhere. But there's a difference between them being everywhere and you meditating on how you can enjoy them. Because Lord Jesus Christ said to lust at a woman is to have adultery. So really, what a man is doing by lusting after a woman is enjoying her physically. And when a man understands that he's actually doing that, then he can come to grips with that and begin to turn himself away from that kind of relationship with women. Otherwise, most men think it's an innocent thing, it's natural, it's okay to do it, and because they think everybody does it, and I've always done it, and that's the way I'm wired. You step back a step and you realize, no, actually what I'm doing is on a subtle plane enjoying with that woman. And when you realize that, particularly if you're a devotee, or for any married man, it's really some form of dishonor to your wife to be looking at another woman, because you're not just looking. I mean, you may just be looking, but if you're looking for more than a few seconds, then you're looking with the desire, the intention to enjoy. That includes looking at pictures, magazines, newspapers, wherever there are beautiful women, lingerie ads, they're everywhere. I was in Target the other day, and there's a picture in the lingerie. I'm walking to go to the back of the store. I walk through the women's lingerie section. Not that I, was thinking, here's the women's lingerie section, I think I'll walk through it. I was just walking through the store, and there are these big ads of women in underwear. And so the guys have to see it when they walk through. It's kind of hard. They're big posters. It's kind of hard to miss. Seen those in Target, Uddhava? Now, next time he goes to Target, he's going to notice them all. So I just polluted his mind. But the point is, they're there, but the point is you don't go, oh, cool, look at these lingerie ads, I get to look at them when I walk through the store. Maybe I'll just stop for a minute and stare at them. After all, they're just there for me to look at, and what's wrong with looking at them? Everything's wrong with looking at them, because now you're going through a process which is creating sanskaras in your heart. So we can't just say, oh, well, they're everywhere, what do you do? And just give up. We do something. Okay, and if you give me another 12 hours, we can get into it more deeply. So, Vaishnav's Morai saying, can you please write? I can't hear. Vaishnav Seva, this is being recorded, so if there's something you didn't hear, Vaishnav Morai, if there's something you didn't hear, then you'll be able to download this audio and or video as well soon. How soon, Uddhava? Will it be up? It will be up this week, sometime this week. Everything is everything in any kind of sensual attraction. Everything is all based around nipping in the bud and not meditating on it. Because whatever you meditate on, you become attracted to. If you meditate on something long enough, it becomes attractive, even if initially you weren't attracted to it. And it may not even be something that's that attractive. So, start talking to yourself, yes. Look at what you're doing. Catch yourself. Use your intelligence. I think Carol is a good listener. Be more in the mode of goodness, sattva gun, so that your intelligence remains sharp. One really big problem for us is that when our lives get a little out of whack, out of Krishna conscious whack, then it's easy for the mind to take over, and we don't have many resources within us to use our intelligence. The intelligence becomes dumb or non-functional. And then if the mind takes over, it tends to pull us into the mode of ignorance. And oftentimes we don't know how to deal with our emotions. We just allow the mind to go along with the emotions, even if the emotions are not helping us. Meditating on attachment becomes more difficult. Yes. The eyes get us into trouble, yeah. So, very good. Bhakti Carol, you're a very good listener. Okay. Nipan says, my humble obeisances, I would just like to thank you so much, my heart, for this. Yes. Thank you, Nipan. Now, Nipun. This is all very important, because one of the things, I may have spoken about this in the past, but I'll speak about it again. One of the things that came up in the Sexual Purity for Men workshop, which we did several weeks ago, was that sexual purity is an essential part, not only of practice of devotional service, but it's an essential part of a happy marriage. And what happens if a man grows up sexually impure? When he becomes married, it becomes more difficult for him to remain a chaste and devoted husband, or vice versa, a chaste and devoted wife, because he has the habit of enjoying, or has had the habit of enjoying with many women or she has had the habit of enjoying with many men. And or he may not be satisfied, or she may not be satisfied with their partner, and it becomes a problem. Now, it should be less of a problem for devotees because we are practicing or attempting to practice some form of sexual purity. So hopefully sexuality is not the center of the marriage, but still it can become problematic if a person enters a marriage and that person has not been sexually pure in their early life. And I don't want to get into it, but these things can lead to other problems such as pornography, which even make it more difficult for a husband in his relationship with his wife, and it make it extremely worrisome for the wife when she finds out that he's looking at pornography, or worse, addicted to it. So, one thing leads to another, and it can create all kinds of troubles in marriage. So, if you are married, or you're thinking of getting married, and you believe that marriage is an important step for you in the peace of your material life and the progress of your spiritual life, then the more sexually controlled you are now, the better. And if you're already married, the more sexually controlled you are now, the better. And if you are married, you can think, particularly for men, where your eyes go. If they're going away towards another woman, you can think about your wife and think, what would my wife think if she knew what I was doing right now? Have you ever heard this? Have you heard this before? It's a really nice thing that one father told his kids. He said, don't do anything that you would be embarrassed telling me that you have done. Isn't that good? But then you could say, don't do anything that you would be embarrassed telling your guru that you've done. And a husband could think, don't look at anything or think of anything you would be embarrassed to have to tell your wife you were thinking or looking at. And I think that will make it really clear what you should be looking at and what you shouldn't be looking at, and when you've gone overboard. Of course, women can say the same thing in their own way. Don't think anything or say anything or do anything that would you'd be embarrassed or it'd be difficult to tell your husband. It's a very nice principle. Don't do anything you would be embarrassed to have to tell your guru. Very interesting, isn't it? So where are we? We're back to what I was saying earlier, and it's being explained to Vaishnava. And so, okay. That's a very nice thought. Yes. Now, as you may know, I did a class on sexual purity. So I've gone quite deeply into the subject to really isolate where the problem lies. And at the same time, what we find is that if we're Krishna conscious, basically it solves that problem. But often there are steps on the way we can miss to bring us to that level of Krishna consciousness in which sexual agitation will become minimal. And so this is really a very Krishna conscious principle. We find it right in the Gita. What is the example of the tortoise? Tortoise withdraws his limbs whenever he sees danger. We have the example, if you meditate on something, you become attached. From attachment, lust develops. So we apply those examples and we see they fit perfectly within the example of how a man has the tendency to look at a woman. And when it's there, draw your eyes back, look away. And when there's the tendency to look or to meditate, then understand from this meditation, attachment will come. And so we apply those principles. Those are necessary principles that we apply. Of course, we can say if we absorb our minds more in Krishna consciousness, then there's not really room for these other things. But it's easier said than done, because the reality is you can absorb your mind in Krishna consciousness very well, day after day after day, month after month, even year after year. But if it's not absorbed, That's really where the difficulty comes. If it's not absorbed, then what do? So you don't really have to worry about it when it's absorbed, but eventually a point comes for most of us from time to time, if not regularly, when it's not absorbed. And then the pullings and the pushings of the senses are there, and that's when we have to deal with it. And that's when these other forms of knowledge, which are more kind of like gyan, not this, or using the intelligence to be analytical, that's when that's essential. So then we start to fall back on, okay, from attachment, lust develops. Just like the tortoise, I should withdraw my limbs. I'll never be senses are never satisfied. So the more you look at a woman, the more dissatisfied you become and more the fire burns. So then at those points, that's when the intelligence needs to kick in based on what we've learned in Krishna consciousness. And when you're doing well in Krishna consciousness, it's all working for you. It's all downhill. It's when you're going uphill is when you need the energy. So these are some of the principles we speak about in sexual purity, what it means to be sexual pure. And you can see from these discussions, it really means to be self-aware, to be aware of what's going on, what you're thinking, what you're looking at, what's going on in your heart. And then how to look at your whole life in a holistic way and see what influences are there in your life that could be disturbing you sexually. Now I'll give you an example. Whoa, we've gone over time, but we're on a roll. So let's not stop now. If anyone has to go, you can go. Here's a really important point, and this will help you with your japa, but I'm going to tie it in to the sexual thing. So, for example, devotees often ask me, and one asked me yesterday, I'm not doing well in my japa, how can I improve? And I tell them, well, there are many things I can tell you to do to improve, but what I've noticed in my own life, particularly in my own life, because I know so many things that I can do to improve, because I've taught it, and as a teacher you really go deep into the subject. So I do know many things, but at the same time I do know that if my life is not supporting my Krishna consciousness, or more specifically, if my life is not supporting my japa, I won't do the things I know, because I won't be in the sattvic mood to do them. I won't be in the frame of mind to do them. There won't be the inspiration. But rather, when I get up in the morning, my inspiration will be to go on the internet and read the news, or do email, or read a book, or wash something, or just get distracted when I should be chanting. Because the day before, my life was not as Krishna consciousness as it needed to be in order to be able to chant good rounds the next morning. And I'm sure you all have experience, and if you kind of look at your life, you can start to see, oh yeah, I stayed up late last night and saw some romantic movie, and then the next morning my mind was disturbed, it was hard to chant. You just put it all together. I've been working 14 hours a day on this project at work for the last week, and when I sit down to chant my rounds, all I can think about is the project. So these things are obvious. You can't, it's very difficult to be working that long and not be thinking about that when you chant. So using the same example, which is extremely practical, and I suggest that you really reflect on this in relation to japa, but I was using that as an example for the sexual thing, is that if you want to deal with sexual, if you want to obtain a greater level of sexual purity, then you have to look at your life in a holistic way and say, is there anything I'm doing that's actually disturbing me sexually, even if it's subtle? And then you start to look in the nooks and crannies of your life where perhaps you don't normally look. You say, well, I like listening to this rock and roll music, and I do like eating these kinds of spicy or very rich foods, and I do eat this late at night, and I really don't exercise much, and I haven't really been absorbing my mind, and I do tend to look a little bit too much at women at work, or I do, glare at the billboards of the half-naked women. When you look this way, you start to realize that you're probably doing things that are sexually disturbing you, and you don't really realize it. You're not really aware of it. In the same way with japa. If you really want to improve your japa, then if you look at your life holistically in the same way, you'll say, what could I do in my life when I'm not chanting that would improve my chanting. And then you'll start to see, little things here and there that you may be doing that in some way could be undermining your chanting that you're not aware of now. May be subtle, but a lot of subtle things for a long time can make a big difference. So basically the answer is the holistic process to Krishna consciousness. Or the example of the dam. The dam has a little leak. So look in your life for the little leaks. Where is it leaking out? In my japa, or where in this case, where is it leaking out sexually? And then as it leaks out, the small hole's going to get bigger if you don't patch it up, if you don't find it. So Das is saying, please suggest a practical solution to understand bodily pleasure doesn't bring lasting happiness. I think it's, just eat a meal. And, you're going to be hungry again, right? The thing also is that I think the irony is that for many of the pleasures of this world, the more you do them, the more you want to do them. So rather than satisfy you, it's creating within you a deeper desire to do it. That's why often when you don't do something, it no longer becomes an issue. So people say, I could never be celibate. Well, that's because they never stopped having sex. So that sexual activity creates a desire for more sexual activity. Overeating creates a desire to overeat more. Eating a lot of chocolate ice cream creates the desire to eat more. What? Mango vanilla ice cream? No. Or it could be. It creates the desire to eat more ice cream. That's just practical. So if we just look at that, it really is showing that the bodily pleasure is short-lived, because the pleasure we get is igniting the desire for greater pleasure. And why would that desire be there if this is a long-lived pleasure? Now, the other thing. The other thing is, so then Das says, sex feels good. Yeah, nobody's saying it doesn't feel good. That doesn't mean that everything that feels, that's like, okay, what's the philosophy? If it feels good, it must be good. No. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it's good. Sex, you can get women pregnant because it feels good. And they can have abortions because it feels good. And you could get AIDS because you did something that feels good. So, everything's meant to be done with discretion. And just like we don't deny that eating is pleasurable, we don't deny that sex is pleasurable. We don't deny any of these things. But Prabhupada always said, you need to regulate it because ultimately we want to transcend the body, and to realize we're not the body. You can't be engrossed in sensual pleasure your entire life. Gradually you have to learn how to get over it, and the best way to renounce it or get over it is to regulate it if you can't give it up right away. So then you're slowing it down and it becomes easier. So, So, ghee on a fire, momentary pleasure, Now, Manjesh wants to know if he can eat chocolate. Okay. Back way when in the day, I was in Mayapur. It was 1975, and they served us sandesh, which was Neapolitan chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. It's like, I guess chocolate's okay. Then later on, GBC said it wasn't because they believed it had caffeine. And then I talked to a devotee who made chocolate, and he said, well, some chocolate does have caffeine and some doesn't, and orange juice has more caffeine than a lot of chocolate. And then later on GBC said it was okay, and then later on they said it wasn't okay, and then someone said, well, it has chemicals in it which are similar to the chemicals that we excrete when we fall in love. And then someone said, well, warriors would eat chocolate and get all, caffeined out, but just get ready to fight. And then GBC said you shouldn't eat it. And then I heard the latest is they said you could. So, how's that for an answer? Go to the latest, call your, the answer to this question, Manjeshes, go to your local GBC and say, Maharaj, what's the GBC resolution on chocolate? Now, if he says the GBC said you can't eat chocolate, then you have to decide, do you want to follow the GBC on this one? So, now all I can say is this. We used to distribute hot chocolate prasadam. And we didn't know anything, so we drank that hot chocolate prasadam at night because it was common for us to drink milk at night. And all of us fell right asleep. So I could definitely say that that hot chocolate didn't have enough caffeine to keep us awake. Okay. So Das says sex for procreation is a form of Krishna. Yeah, Krishna says that. Kamosmi. I am that. And Das says, I think we should all have training in celibacy. Yeah, celibate training is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to have, especially in entering a committed relationship with another woman. And Vaishnava Murai wants to know when this session will end, and this session will end 14 minutes ago. We've gone 14 minutes too long. And yeah. Yes. So, the eternal chocolate debate. Now, let me see. Did I have any chocolate? I had chocolate today. Just think of that. I actually had chocolate today. Is that amazing? My wife actually buys chocolate. And I actually eat it. And I'm admitting that in front of the whole world. I don't know if I'm going to be stoned to death or what. Okay, Bhakti and Carol says, I heard. Look up the Shiva Swami site. So this is, she heard it, but you have to look it up. Prabhupada said, not because of caffeine. Then it was perhaps talked about that it did not have caffeine, and perhaps Prabhupada made determination on wrong info. I've looked up, and it's supposed to have small amount of caffeine, but then as to whether we still cannot have chocolate candies made by outside source, but if we think GB says okay and we want it, then we have to make our own. Whoa! Make your own chocolate. Bhakti and Carol, I got the solution. You make chocolate and send it to all of us. And then this will be bona fide Krishna conscious chocolate. Anyone know if there's a support group amongst devotees for persons recovering from sex addiction? Das, why don't you write me and I'll put you in touch with a devotee who might be able to help you. Mahatmadasa@gmail.com. And I think we better end here, otherwise we'll be in trouble. Or Uddhava will be in trouble with his wife, and his wife won't like me because I keep him here late. So, thank you for all attending. If you want to hear this lecture, or you want your friends to hear it, send them to krishna.com/Mahatma, and there will be this lecture in a few days, along with the past lectures on this topic, and along with the past lectures on about 5 other topics that I have discussed over the last few years. Thank you for your patience, and I hope I wasn't too goofy tonight, but I just had to be a little goofy, because this is such a serious subject. Can't be serious all the time. Okay, thank you, Hare Krishna. We'll see you next week, same time. Hari Hari Bol.